What an absolute trip it must be for somebody or some family who is considering moving to a new location and taking a trip there with those lenses of a possible move across country or even the world. And that's what this video is going to discuss with you today, is the first visit to Fort Collins when considering moving here. What's up, everybody? My name is Patrick Soukup with Soukup Real Estate Services here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing if you're looking at learning everything there is to know about Fort Collins and Northern Colorado, eating, sleeping, playing, working, living, and taking your first visit. If at the end of the video you've enjoyed the content, give it a thumbs up and comment, or maybe even share it with a friend. And as much as we like making these YouTube videos, we are licensed real estate agents here in the state of Colorado. So if you're considering moving, buying, selling, or investing here in Northern Colorado, give us a call, text, or email. We've got your back. Now, without any further delay, let's take into consideration what maybe you and yours should do on your first trip when considering moving to Northern Colorado. Let's go. So typically there's about two groups of people that are taking trips here to Northern Colorado. Those that are exploring the area for the absolute first time, they've done a ton of research about Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, and need to come check it out for themselves. First-hand experience, do we want to move here? And then the other group, those that already know that Fort Collins or somewhere in Northern Colorado is the place for them, and now they need to take a different lens when visiting here of where do we want to move and live within Fort Collins and Northern Colorado. So we're gonna break those two up and discuss what they should do, some goals, ideas, and things to consider when spending their time here on their first visit. So the first group is going to be the group that is taking their absolute first visit to learn if Fort Collins and Northern Colorado is the place for them. And what I talk about with people is it's usually like the 80-20 rule. I'd say 80% of the people that come here to Fort Collins, Northern Colorado are sold on it. But then the other 20%, yeah, for some reason, one reason or another, it just doesn't fit. Too small of a community, maybe not enough public transportation, not a major sports team here, whatever that might be. There's usually about an 80-20 split. But some things to take into consideration when you are visiting here are, should you meet with a realtor on the first time? How long should you stay? Where should you stay? Maybe things to do. So let's go. Should you meet with a realtor? If you want to have a cup of coffee with us and my team, we would absolutely love to meet with you. We are actually meeting with some folks from Morocco here this Thursday that will actually be working with my partner, Izzy, and we're excited just to literally have a cup of coffee, introduce. They are actually at least a couple years out from buying. And generally, a lot of people that are taking their first visit here, I would say, are generally anywhere between 3 to 6, 12 months out from moving here. But we have met with folks that are anywhere from a year or 2 years out. And again, that first visit, meeting with a realtor, to discuss, different things maybe isn't necessarily needed, but to make that general first introduction, we'd love to sit down with you, buy you a cup of coffee, baked goods from Little Bird Bake Shop, and just chop it up for a little bit, get to know each other on a first-hand basis. Now, how long of a trip should you plan on that first visit? I would suggest a 4 to 5 day trip. You're gonna want to wake up, maybe start like on a Wednesday and go through Sunday. And the reason for that is to see what Fort Collins, Northern Colorado is like during those work week days. And then also what that Friday night, Saturday night vibe is. Because as we have discussed in previous videos, Wednesday night in Fort Collins, really any time of the year, is pretty much a ghost town. So getting that experience of what it looks like on a weekday and also during the weekend, I would say is pretty important. In addition to 4 to 5 days in Fort Collins, we are a sunshine state. 300 days of sunshine is what they claim. And while you might come here and there's a couple days of rain or wind or something along those lines, I would say if you're here for 4 to 5 days, you generally should experience at least a couple days of nice rain if you happen to stumble upon some days that are rainy, windy, or snowy. At least if you are here for the 4 to 5 days, you might get some sunshine and some warmth, depending on the time of year. Now, where should you stay? A lot of the people that we talk to that I would say really experience Fort Collins firsthand are staying in an Airbnb close and around to Old Town. And that's because if there is an energy center, Fort Collins and Old Town Square is it. You're gonna wanna wake up, hear the traffic in the mornings. Is that something that you can vibe with? Walk to Starry Night or Little Bird Bake Shop or Everyday Joe's and have a cup of coffee. Maybe have some breakfast at the Silver Grill, but then walking around Old Town and experiencing what Fort Collins is like and the vibe, whether that's on a Wednesday or a Saturday or both. And then again, in the evenings, you can walk out there and explore rather than taking an Uber or, really taking time to get downtown and feeling like, well, do we want to go back downtown? No, we're on the southeast side of town. So I would say the people that have kind of experienced Fort Collins the most is staying in an Airbnb in and around Old Town. Alrighty, and this is actually, I would say, the number one question we get from people who reach out to us prior to coming to Fort Collins is, what should we do when we are there? And I would say, again, being here for 4 to 5 days, if you're exploring Fort Collins, is this the place for you? I would take one of those days to drive around northern Colorado, explore Wellington, Timnath, Windsor, Johnstown, Berthoud, Loveland, and Fort Collins, and even have a day that you can drive up to Estes Park and explore the Rocky Mountain National Park. I think if you have that time period, that is a well-spent day. And again, having another day where you are just able to walk around Old Town, go have lunch, sit down, have a cup of coffee, walk around some of the shops, just to feel what the vibe is like in and around Old Town and that energy of Fort Collins. Is there that situation and that atmosphere that you want you and yours to move to? Now, if you have kids, here are just some things that you can consider, but we have a more encompassing list if you want to reach out to us. Go check out the Discovery Center. Maybe take a drive up the Poudre River to the Poudre Play Park. They can get out, walk around, run around, see some guys, gals tubing down the Poudre, jumping off Picnic Rock. If they're hungry, go check out 80s Pizza. Now, it's not the best pizza, but it is a fun atmosphere. Kids enjoy it. You really like getting in there and just kind of seeing the 80s all around you. Now, parks in Fort Collins are phenomenal. Twin Silo Park, Roland Moore, Spring Canyon, Fossil Creek, City Park. These are all parks that you can go in and around and explore, let the kids out, run around, play around, and really enjoy the outside weather. Just kind of take a break from that Old Town, from that southeast, from exploring the area, and just get out for a couple hours and run around. And something that is fun for kids, and you can kind of spend an afternoon, is go to the Foothills Mall. There is kind of an east lawn where there's some places that you can eat, go to Bad Daddy's Burger, and then maybe just hang around there. Now, there are concerts and venues on Friday nights during the summer, warmer weather, but if you're there in the afternoon and you just kind of want to hang out, grab food, maybe go see a movie, the Cinemark movie theater is right there as well. Now, if you do not have kids, here are some things that you can do as well. I would go and check out the patio at Odell's and or New Belgium, or both. Go spend an evening at The Social. It was just ranked the #1 speakeasy in all of the United States. Check out a brewery tour. Odell's, New Belgium are a couple, but you do need to look to see if you need to schedule in advance and reserve a spot on one of those tours. Fort Collins doesn't have a ton of extracurriculars during the weekday, but on the weekends, check out the Comedy Club, Washington's, the Armory, or drive up to the Mishawaka, eat lunch, sit by the Poudre, and potentially see a show if it's that evening and they have got something going on that weekend. And a couple other things that you can do that a lot of people have asked us is rent out a bike from the Garage, ride around Old Town, the Poudre Trail, Spring Creek Trail. Fort Collins has over 280 miles of biking trails throughout. So grab a bike, rent it for the afternoon, ride it around, see if that's something that's gonna vibe with you. And then finally, check out the Lyric on the north side of town. They definitely have more fun, artsy, non-mainstream movies that you can check out, but is definitely a fun scene and vibe there. So those are some things that you can do whether you have kids or not kids. And the ultimate goal of this trip, from what I can tell, is what's the vibe of the people? Do we like the surrounding areas? Is it close to airports? What's the traffic situation like? The goal of this trip is really to understand Fort Collins And can you move here? Can you move your family here and enjoy it and see yourself growing old or growing over the next few years at least in this location? And does it mesh with you and yours? Now, the second group of people, these are the ones that have come to Fort Collins before probably, or have family and went to school here, friends that went to school here, or they visited here, drove through here, whatever that might be. These people know that Fort Collins in Northern Colorado is the place for them. Now, we're gonna go through kind of the same situation as the first group of what they should do when they're here. And I would say, first and foremost, should they meet with a realtor? I would say yes. One of the things that we would do is jump into my truck or one of my partner's cars and just drive around Northern Colorado for 2 to 3 hours. Now, if they know that Fort Collins is the place for them, then we'll really just focus on Fort Collins and look at the different quadrants: northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. If they're open to the idea of other places in and around Fort Collins, we'd go check out Wellington, Timnath, Windsor, Johnstown, Berthoud, Loveland, and still, you probably need 3 to 4 hours at that point, but being in a car for that long does get a little bit tedious and boring. But I would say 2 to 3 hours or 3 to 4 hours, depending on what your goal is as far as Northern Colorado or purely Fort Collins. But meeting with a realtor, getting in their truck or car, vehicle, and driving around with the goal of where do we want to live within this area. Now, Fort Collins is unique. A lot of people come from all over the country and area, and they're looking at specific neighborhoods or sub kind of areas of the community that they absolutely have to get into good schools, or that's just the specific part of town that is really, really desirable. I would say Fort Collins in general, what you're looking at doing is determining the goal should be whether you want to be in the northeast, northwest, southeast, or southwest side of Fort Collins. And with that, if you can have that goal when you go back home and you start to look at homes virtually on the market and you know which quadrant it is, we can kind of narrow down our kind of area that we're looking at least a little bit better, north versus south, east versus west, and we can kind of go from there. So I would say absolutely meeting with a realtor on that trip would be worth it. Now, how long should you stay? I would say here 2 to 3 days, because depending on your time frame on when you're trying to buy a house, if it's 3 to 6 months, you might extend that from 2 to 3 days to 3 to 4 days. Now, if your goal is to buy a house in the next couple months, a week long is absolutely okay. We had clients come here from California that on their trip, their goal was to find a house to buy on that trip. And I think it was like, we're pretty much here until we need to not be here. And so homes usually come on the market on Thursday. So at least having maybe a 7 to 10 day window if your goal is to buy a house on that trip. So you have 2 weekends worth of homes on the market. But if your goal is just to determine where in Fort Collins, 2 to 3 days is probably sufficient. And that way you can get into the truck with us, you can drive around the neighborhoods for yourself one day, and then just have a day to explore. Now, where should you stay? Again, I would say if you know the quadrant of the area that you want to be in, again, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, I would try to find an Airbnb in that area so that you can kind of even solidify that decision or change that decision if you wake up in that Airbnb on the southeast side of town and you need to go have a cup of coffee and it's a 7-mile drive and you just don't like the way that feels from the southeast or northwest. You're like, hey, you know what? It's just not our vibe. We thought we wanted to be close to Laurie State Park, but really I think we do want to be on the southeast side of town. But that being said, or you could absolutely love the area that you chose. You have 2 to 3 days to wake up in those neighborhoods in that short-term rental. The flip side, if you want to just purely enjoy your time here and focus on really dialing in an area or subsection, I would stay at the Elizabeth or the Armstrong Hotel down in Old Town. Just, more for the atmosphere, the enjoyment, and kind of have a portion of the trip that is pure enjoyment. Now, things to do. Ultimately, this trip is to be a little bit more business-minded. You are coming here with the intention of figuring out exactly where you're gonna be. You're gonna be spending a day with me in my truck, or at least a half day. Then you're gonna be spending a day by yourself, driving around those neighborhoods even more. But if there are things to do, all of the things above, as far as, as far as going to the Discovery Museum, the Poudre Play Park, driving up to the Mishawaka, all of those things still apply here. And if you need to break up your day, I would absolutely suggest to do that. one thing to take into consideration if you really want to get kind of all encompassing, a lunch, hang out, play, joy, go to the exchange, have a chicken and cone, and then have some ice cream afterwards to just treat yourself, because you are kind of working and you have a lot of mental stress during this time, just trying to figure out, hey, where do we want to live? Where do we want to make this transition? Where is our vibes kind of feeling? And I would say with the intention of this first trip being where do we want to live within Fort Collins, it's much more business minded, not as vacation mode. So take into consideration a half day just to kind of break away, go and enjoy yourself. So yes, all the things that I've said prior do apply. We do have a more encompassing list. If you want to reach out, send me an email and I can get you kind of more of a things to do while you're here. But again, kind of business oriented trip here. Now, whether it's your first trip to determine whether Fort Collins is going to be the place for you and your family, or if you know that Fort Collins is the place and this trip was to kind of get in a specific neighborhood, area, subsection, quadrant, that is a great thing to do. But one of the conversations that I also like to have is, how do these people that are moving here from all over the country and world operate when they buy a home? So have a discussion with your realtor and see, hey, what does it look like with you and your team as far as when we are considering buying a house? Do we need to travel out here? Do we need to do a short-term rental? How does the virtual look like? These are all things that me and my team have done on a consistent basis and really dialed in the processes. And we can work with people on the entire spectrum of, hey, financially, we really just can't afford to fly out here every other weekend and need to make decisions virtually until we get into that inspection period, and then we'll fly out when we're under contract. 2, hey, on the flip side, we absolutely need to rent here for whether it's a short-term rental for 3 months, 6 to 12 month flexible lease. We want to get out there, get our boots on the ground, and every Thursday when new properties come onto the market, we're going to get out there and see homes. So have a discussion with your realtor of like, hey, where is our comfort zone? What does it look like? What can you expect from us? Because some of the things that you can't necessarily see on those virtual tours is hear as much traffic as there are, smell what the smell is like, look kind of as far as from outside of a camera lens, and what does the kind of eyesight aerials look like in and around you, and what are the surrounding areas and schools. So, you know, we can absolutely make anybody comfortable on that spectrum of tours. So have that discussion, but otherwise, this first trip is super important. We'd love to discuss with you how that might look for you and yours if you're considering moving to Fort Collins in Northern Colorado. And if you want to, you know, check out these other videos that might help you determine whether Fort Collins is a good fit for you. Now, again, my name is Patrick Soukup. Feel free to reach out to us, give us a call, text, or an email. We've got your back when it comes to moving to Northern Colorado and Fort Collins, Colorado. All right, take care.